Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. We're approaching Christmas, so it's time to start making ornaments. Today we've got a real simple ornament. It's a great item to give away to friends or to sell at craft shows because it's fast, it's easy, doesn't take a lot of wood. Let's get started. We're going to start off with a block of wood about 3 1/4 inches long by 1 1/2 inch square, or about 81 millimeters long and 38 millimeters square. Any straight-grained, light-colored wood will work fine. That could be a lighter woods work better than heavier woods because it's an ornament. It's not going to be hollow. So it could be basswood. It could be this piece is basswood. It could be poplar. It could even be pine. So we're going to just chuck this in our jaw. We could do this between centers, but I don't want to damage the top with a live center, so I'm just going to put it in the scroll chuck. Not my favorite way of chucking up an item, but you know, as long as it's not sticking out too long, it'll work just fine. Now you could round this off with a spindle rough and gouge. You've probably seen me do that before, but for a blank this small, I think a skew will work just fine. We're going to turn this at a fairly fast rate of speed, maybe around 2,000 or so. We're just going to take a peeling cut till we get around. Cool, ride the bevel, lift the handle till it cuts. We're just going to take a planing cut to a nice smooth surface. And it's almost round. Got a little flat spot there, a little flat spot there. We're going to take a little more planing cuts. Not a difficult cut of wood. I'm using a 3 1/4 inch skew. Again, cutting in the lower third because this is the bevel. We're going to anchor it on. If you touch it out here, you're going to, the fulcrum is here and it's going to come slamming down. And then we'll come back a little bit more in this direction. Now, when I make this kind of project, especially if it's a project that I do over and over and over, I just find it very helpful to make a storyboard, or what one Canadian called a preacher. So we're going to just make a slight chamfer here, so I'm going to mark that. Then we're going to come down, and not much room here. I probably should change the shape of this a little bit. So with using the pencil and the little notches on the storyboard, I transfer the size of the features as shown here in this diagram from the storyboard to the blank I'm going to be turning. Now I want to make the top of the hat and the brim approximately the same size. I'm going to go ahead and mark this just in case I hit that pencil mark with a little V-cut. You know, I know a lot of y'all are new turners get frightened off with the skew, but it's not that difficult. Making a V-cut is not that difficult, so we're going to make this slight little chamfer here. So now I'm going to take I'm going to leave that size. Actually, I might take it down just a tiny little bit. And then I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to go ahead, since I know a lot of y'all be more comfortable using a spindle gouge, so let me switch to a spindle gouge. And we're just going to come in. This is a 3/8 inch spindle gouge. Don't take off too much wood at a time. This is not a bowl gouge, so it's for detail work. And I want a nice kind of bit of a curve here. Bring this in here just a little bit. Now I find in workshops a lot of beginners want to take the tool in and out, in and out. And every time you do that, you're going to leave a little bit of ripple. So try to make continuous cuts wherever possible. And that'll give you a nice smooth cut like this. Now, I'm going to make a little V groove right here at the bottom of the head. Now, part of the head is up here in the hat, so this is not going to be a perfect sphere. But we're going to make the body, the head just a little bit smaller than the body, so we're going to leave the body the full diameter. And I like to make V cuts when I'm coming in on essentially what's a bead, because it just makes it a lot easier. So we're going to come in here, make it a little deeper. Now I can come in there and easily make that adjustment with the head. And the hat brim, I want to kind of concave it in just a little bit. This is kind of a tricky cut. We're going to kind of undercut it a little bit. We're going to go back to trying to make this as round as we can. We're just going to anchor the tool, ride the bevel, which means the tip is not touching the wood. Slowly lift the handle till it cuts. And then move the flute in the direction of the cut. Look for any ripples, try to clean those up. Pine is cheap, but let me tell you, it's not very forgiving. But again, this is basswood. Now the body. I want a little bit longer, so I'm going to have to pull this out here in just a moment, but I'll wait till I finish some of this work here. I've got a little bit of a... So, in order to get in there, I've either got to use a skew, or as an alternative, I could use a very shallow detail gouge, because I've got to be able to get in there and without having this wing touch the wood, and yet bring it over almost perpendicular. With a flute almost perpendicular. But this will work. And that's got it. Now notice I'm leaving just a little bit of a flat on the rim that will sand off some of the edges. And it's kind of sloped down in this direction. So let's go ahead and sand this up. Touch up the top just a little bit. I want to keep these edges fairly crisp, so I want to be careful not to round it over. This will just soften the edge a little bit just by sanding it. If I'm not too awfully careful, that's okay. And one of the goals as a skill builder is to try to make your cuts as smooth as possible to minimize the sanding. That's just the goal. You'll still have to sand, but it's a worthy goal. Gives you something to shoot for when you make a lot of these. I'm just going to rub that over there like that, hit it here, and look for those ripples and deal with the ripples, or tool marks. Call them ripples. Might be gullies, you know. If it's a gully, I would say go back and try to cut it again. If it's a ripple, it'll sand out. Gullies don't sand out. Now, if you didn't get the top of the hat as smooth as possible, for example, if this was a parting cut with a parting tool, you're going to get some torn out grain. I didn't get as clean a cut as I would like, because it was cut on a bandsaw, and it left it somewhat rough. So I'm going to get a little coarser grit of sandpaper to try to smooth some of this out a little bit. I want to credit this idea to Rick Morris. Rick used to live down the road from me. Some of you might have seen his channel. We did a collaboration. I'll have a link above to some shop organization videos. And then he's since moved to Northern Virginia. All right, now we're going to put a hatband on here. There's several ways you can do a hatband. I could use a felt tip pin, but heck, let me show you another little trick. You can use a piece of laminate scrap, for example. Let me show you how that works. High speed. Just press it in until it burns. The other trick that always works for me is a piece of exotic, something from South America or whatever that's got some resin in it, and make it to a sharp edge on a sander. And then this one will transfer the resin. And there you go. That's got a nice little hatband. Now I'm going to go ahead and and use some abrasive paste to polish this off. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and mark the center hole with just the corner of my skew, just like that. And now I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to use a pen vise. You can get these from your hardware store or home development center. I'll have a link to some of these on my Amazon store if y'all haven't checked that out. If you don't have one, it's a convenient place to get one. And you just got to use a bit that will fit the screw eye. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and use some abrasive paste. So the abrasive paste, you know, you rub it on with the lathe off. Get it in all your little nooks and crannies. And it, in effect, takes your finish up to like double the last grit. So if you sand up to 280, 320, that's plenty for something like this. And then let the abrasive paste take care of the rest of it. I got a link here for making abrasive paste, but this basically Yorkshire grit, UV Axe abrasive paste. All very similar products. They all work great. Go to a clean side to make sure. You got to keep doing this until you don't see any signs of that abrasive paste coming off. And then for a finish, I like to use a friction polish. I'll show you that in just a moment. I'm using Mylan's friction polish, but I've got it in a crystal hut bottle. But basically, this is a little bit of waxed shellac in with some alcohol. And then we're going to turn the speed up and just friction it out. Now, keep in mind when you're using friction polish, don't touch it with your fingers. You'll get fingerprints on it. Although it'll dry the touch by, you know, flashing off the alcohol on the lathe like this. You got to give it time to cure overnight. So be very careful. Maybe use a paper towel to handle it or something like that as you take it off the lathe and put it away. It's not going to interfere with the chuck or the wood. I want to be very careful making that entry cut, slicing into it on that corner. Let's see if I can't square it up any better than that. So just turn it, put my finger here, so it's coming in here, so that side's got to go out. Okay. Maybe minor adjustments may be all it's. I think that's probably close enough. Alright, get the speed up a little bit. Slice in, being careful. Put enough pressure on it. I'm not going to skate back into the chuck. And now I'm just going to round over the body. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and use the thin parting tool. Thin being about 1/16 of an inch. Heck, you could use make one of these out of an old kitchen knife. You want to slightly concave it in, so if it sits flat on the table, if it ever does, it'll sit flat. Now I got to slow this down to do the final part off. Just try to catch it. And there we go. Now, we'll sand this off on a couple of ways to sand that. If you got a belt sander, use a belt sander. If you don't, or this might even be faster and easier, just glue you some onto some flat substrate like MDF and just get rid of that tiny little nub. People aren't going to look at the bottom much, so just knock off. I use 120 grit on this substrate. This works for me. And you can put a little finish. You put a little finish on the bottom. Now the next step is going to be the embellishing. Let me show you how we're going to do that. Okay, first let's talk about screw eyes. You know, you can buy different sizes. You can buy earring fittings. This is the size I prefer. It's got 3.5 millimeter hole in it. It's about 9 millimeters, 8 to 10 millimeters long. it's tiny and it looks nice. This to me looks clunky. So if I look at the two together, for example, one just doesn't look. This one just doesn't look right. Doesn't look right. This little one works just well, and you can get these typically in nickel, zinc, or a silver color or brass color. They work. Another option is you can make them. You can buy this craft wire. I can't tell you how thick it is. I don't remember. It's not marked on the side anymore. Someone I saw in a video, I think, said it was 16 gauge, but I thought it was closer to 22. So I'm not sure. So all you're going to do is twist it around something like this. I'm going to use an Allen wrench. You could use a finishing nail. Just grab it with a pair of pliers. Pinch it together. Use 3 hands and just twist it like this. Somebody showed this trick. It might have been Rick Morris, and they actually put this in a drill, and it worked very slick. If you're doing a bunch of them, I would explore that. If you're doing 1 or 2, this will work just fine. Anyway, you get the idea, and then you just trim it off, get the drill bit big enough to accommodate it. But again, I like the little small ones. They're only in the United States. You can get 100 of them for a couple of bucks at Peachtree Woodworking and I'm sure other places. Now let's decorate the front. This takes me back a ways to the first week I was turning. I watched a demonstration by Nick Cook, and he had a different version of the Frosty Snowman. But the one thing that he said was make the mouth using a tiny little Sharpie permanent marker, and you use 5 dots because it's 5 lumps of coal. Kind of messy, and because 3 is not enough and 7 is too many, I think is the way he put it. So use 5. It's okay. Now the next thing he showed was he introduced me to puff paint. This is something you can get at the craft store. It's some kind of acrylic, and you can use it to decorate t-shirts. I went out and bought the orange and the black as he suggested, and guess what? 15 years later, I'm still using it. It still works. So with the orange, this is a little bit of a trick, and I might have to practice on this on a piece of paper first. Now here's the trick. This is supposed to be, as we know, a carrot. So if you, with a little practice, you can actually pull this out just a little bit instead of just making a little dot. Don't pull it out too much, but just a little bit. And there we go. There's the carrot nose, and then we're going to use the black puff paint for the eyes and some buttons. I like to use 3 buttons, but you might like 2, but it gives it a little 3-dimensional effect, this puff paint. This was 89 cents or something for each of these bottles. It's just dirt cheap. And there we go, Mr. Frosty. Now, a couple more embellishing details I want to show you. Alright, I didn't put the screw eye in. Let's do that. Don't be tempted to try to put a screw eye in without pre-drilling a hole. It does not work. It will snap it off. It's funny, if you look at comments when people buy these things on Amazon and they talk about how poor they were because they snapped off, and you see these people trying to put these in a hard plastic or something without drilling a hole. It's like, hello. Drill a little hole, appropriate size hole, and in it goes. Then what I like to do, you could give them away like this, but I tell you what, I think adding a little round piece of ribbon, or a flat ribbon, for that matter, if you've got the right size, just dresses it up a little bit for very little more effort. And if you're making a lot of Christmas tree ornaments over the years, go ahead and lay in your supplies. Like I said, like that puff paint, which I've been using for 15 years. Trim off the ends. This is still drying, so I'm going to be careful not to touch it. Now the next trick, my wife said she found this ribbon for me. It is not what I would picked out for the ribbon, and I didn't cut it long enough. But anyhow, you can cut this ribbon and tie it around and make a little scarf. I'll have a link to a playlist of over 30 videos I've done over the years on making Christmas tree ornaments. It'll be up here. I appreciate your comments, so keep them coming. I especially appreciate you supporters who bought me a virtual cup of coffee. Not necessary, not required, but certainly appreciate it. Y'all stay safe and come on back here.